14 fortified headquarters were finished for one man, and you can still find most of them. About 20 were planned. They took over 1 million cubic meters of concrete and nearly 12 million days of forced labor, most of it for hillsides Hitler never visited. That was the plan. By 1945, German engineers were dynamiting their own bunkers before the Allies could photograph them. 10 of them are still there. Number 1 is Werwolf, a pine forest north of Vinnytsia in Ukraine, where the demolition was so complete that the only intact thing left is a swimming pool. Those numbers come from the after-the-battle survey of Hitler's headquarters, which went round and counted them. The smallest one on its list cost almost nothing and was used for 8 days. It is also the one that has been most completely erased, and that turns out to be the pattern rather than the exception. Number 10. Tannenberg, Kniebis, Germany. Drive the Black Forest high road south towards the Alexanderschanze, and you pass a car park at nearly 1,000 meters with spruce on both sides and nothing to look at. Walk 300 meters east into the trees and you find concrete. This was Tannenberg, and it was the smallest headquarters the Third Reich ever finished for Hitler. Work started on the 1st of October 1939. Organisation Todt didn't build from scratch. They extended an existing heavy anti-aircraft position on the western air defence line, which is why the site never got a proper code word. Tannenberg was already the name of the ridge. What they ended up with was 2 bunkers, holding 275 square metres between them, and 1 wooden barracks of 85. Staff officers of the Armed Forces High Command were billeted 2 kilometres away in the Hotel Alexanderschanze, because there was nowhere on site to put them. Hitler flew into Uttingen airfield on the 27th of June 1940, after France had already collapsed. The concrete was too new. It hadn't dried out, the rooms were wet, and a local plumber later described the drains failing and parts of the headquarters standing in water. He spent most of that week outdoors. He left at midday on the 5th of July and never returned. A guard detachment stayed on until the 25th of November. After that, it belonged to the Military District Command in Stuttgart, which had no use for it. German engineers blew the bunkers apart in early April 1945, days before American troops reached the ridge. In 1946 and 47, local people carted the rubble away and built with it. 3 broken bunkers are still in the trees, and the area around them is now a nature reserve inside the Black Forest National Park. Number 9. Felsennest, Rodert, Germany. About 30 kilometers south of Bonn, above the village of Rodert, there's a wooded hill with a footpath running up it from the Napoleonstrasse. Under the leaf litter, you can make out foundations, slabs of concrete, and reinforcing bars bent upwards out of the ground. There is no sign. There is no information panel. The Rhineland Heritage Register lists it as a bunker ruin and notes that nothing on the ground tells you so. This was the first fixed headquarters of the war. Organisation Todt extended an anti-aircraft battery position on the Ezelsberg in the autumn of 1939. And on the 22nd of April 1940, Hitler chose it over the far grander complex being built for him in Hesse. The reason was signals. The communications fit out in Hesse was running late, and this one was ready. It had 4 rooms. Wilhelm Keitel worked in it, and so did Hitler's valet. From those 4 rooms, between the 10th of May and the 6th of June 1940, Hitler ran the invasion of the Netherlands, Belgium, Luxembourg, and France. The Army High Command sat a few kilometers away in a hut camp around a forester's house. Ribbentrop, Himmler, and the head of the Reich Chancellery lived in a train parked at Flammersfeld. Therefore, the site kept working long after he'd gone. In September 1944, it became a headquarters for the German 7th Army, and the Ardennes offensive was run from the same hill. Allied aircraft hit it twice in January 1945, and in March, German engineers blew it up on their way out. Then something stranger happened. The name Felsennest had never been a secret. It sat on official Nazi-era topographic maps, printed in plain type. In the 1970s, it was quietly deleted from the map, and the ridge was renamed Esselsberg, which means Donkey Hill. Number 8. Wolfsschlucht 1, Bruly-de-Pesche, Belgium. A few kilometers from the French border, in the far south of Namur province, there's a village of a few dozen houses, a church with a squat tower, and a moss-covered concrete cube sitting in the woods with 2 armoured doors. The cube weighs about 600 tons and measures 7 meters on each side. On the 28th of May 1940, the 119 people who lived in Bruly-de-Pesche were ordered out of their houses, along with the inhabitants of the settlements around it. Organisation Todd then built a headquarters in roughly a fortnight. Hitler flew in on the 6th of June and stayed until the 24th. The village was rearranged around him. The church bell was taken out and a water tank was put in the tower. The nave became a cinema where he watched newsreels. The school became the map room. And here's the detail that gets missed. He barely used the bunker at all. He complained that the site wasn't secure, disliked the mosquitoes indoors, and spent most of his time in the open air, walking the woods and standing on a small plinth in a semicircular walled cutting to address his commanders. From that village, he corrected the terms he intended to impose on France. And on the 22nd of June 1940, they were signed in a railway carriage at Compiègne, in the same clearing where Germany had surrendered in 1918. He left 2 days later. Bruly-de-Pesche is now an open-air museum, the Grand Quartier General Allemand 1940. 2 rebuilt chalets house exhibitions, one on the headquarters and one on the Belgian resistance that operated in these woods afterwards. The bunker is open, so is the swimming pool that was dug for a man who stayed 18 days. Panels through the village tell you what happened to the 119. Number 7. Anlage, Mitte, Konewka and Jelen, Poland. Northeast of Tomaszów Mazowiecki, in flat pine forest near Spala, there's a reinforced concrete tunnel 380 meters long with a railway track running through it. A separate underground passage, 80 meters long, connects it to a bunker that held the generator. A few kilometers away at Jelen, there's another one, almost identical. The decision to build came in the autumn of 1940. Labour camps went up at Tomaszów and Białobrzegi. The cover name was Askania Mitte, and, on paper, the whole project belonged to a chemical works. The purpose was simple. When the war against the Soviet Union began, entire staff trains would need somewhere bomb-proof to stand, and Hitler wanted a bolt hole in central Poland in case the Red Army counter-attacked towards East Prussia. The Red Army didn't counter-attack. Hitler never came. Anlage Mitte is a completed Führer headquarters that was never used as one, and by 1944 the Jelen shelter had been reduced to parking freight wagons for the Daimler-Benz works near Tomaszów. If you're enjoying these, subscribe, because there's a version of this list for almost every occupied country in Europe, and we're working through them. And stay with me, because the site at number 3 is the largest thing in this entire video, and Hitler spent a single day inside it. By 1945, the Red Army had crossed the Police and taken Tomaszów, and neither tunnel had ever fired a shot or sheltered anyone important. Konewka is now a museum. You can walk the tunnel, look at the exhibits, and use the underground passage to the generator bunker. Jelen sits at the end of a forest track with the doors open and nobody selling tickets. Number 6. Anlage Sud, Stepina-Cieszyna, Poland. Between 2 villages in the hills southwest of Rzeszów, a concrete arch runs for 393 meters across open farmland. It stands nearly 12 meters high with walls 2 meters thick, and the curve is deliberate. The engineers designed it so a bomb would slide off the shoulder rather than punch through, and reckoned it would take repeated hits from 500-kilogram shells. Airlocks and sealed gates protected against gas. It was built in 1940 and 41 by Organisation Todd using Polish forced labour from camps nearby, and it has a twin in the town of Stryzhavka. On the 27th of August 1941, Benito Mussolini's train pulled into the tunnel at Stepina. Hitler's train stood in the other one. The two of them met for several hours to talk about the war against the Soviet Union, and the meeting was held aboard Hitler's train, which he never left. The next morning, his train was the first to leave. He came back once in October, and that was the entire operational history of the biggest railway shelter complex in Poland. What comes next is the part that never makes any sense with these places. After the war, the tunnel became a military store. Then it became a depot for the Polish State Fish Trading Company. Then it housed the offices of an association of agricultural guilds. Somewhere in the 1960s, the arch built to survive a direct hit while two dictators divided up Russia was full of frozen carp. The Commune of Freystack owns it now. It's protected under the National Programme for Defensive Architecture, and you can walk the whole length of it. Number 5. Adlerhorst, Ziegenberg, Germany. In the wooded hills north of Frankfurt, there's a settlement of neat, half-timbered houses, and several of them are standing on concrete. One guest house is built directly on the foundation of a bunker that held the armed forces' high command. Between September 1939 and August 1940, to plans by Albert Speer, Organisation Todd built 7 reinforced bunkers here and clad them to look like traditional German cottages. House 1 was for Hitler. House 2 was the officers' mess. The others held the high command, the general staff, the propaganda ministry and the security detail. And the 7th was disguised as a brick wall. Later, fake evergreen trees were added on top to defeat aerial photography. Hitler inspected it in February 1940 and turned it down. He handed it to Hermann Göring for the air war against Britain, and from July 1941 the buildings were an army convalescent home. Therefore, it sat almost idle for 4 years, which is exactly why he ended up there. After the bomb in the briefing hut in July 1944, and with the Red Army closing on East Prussia, the fake village was the only Western headquarters left. He moved in on the 11th of December 1944, briefed his senior commanders for the Ardennes offensive over 2 days, spent Christmas there, and broadcast his New Year message to the German people from the press bunker. He left for Berlin on the 16th of January 1945. On the 19th of March, the Allies worked out what the place was and bombed it for 45 minutes, killing 10 civilians. On the 28th came the order to evacuate and dynamite everything. American troops arrived 2 days later and found it burned. The motorpool hall survived and has offices in it. The rest is under people's houses. If a headquarters this well hidden was still standing when he needed it, the one at number 1 had a very different ending. Number 4. Olga, near Orsha, Belarus. This one you cannot really visit, because there is almost nothing to visit. Roughly 200 kilometers from Minsk, on the road near Orsha, there are foundations, a scatter of blockwork, and some overgrown ground. The idea was discussed at the Wolf's Lair on the 20th of June 1943 and surveyed on site a week later. Organisation Todd began work in July. The plan was a forward headquarters for the summer offensive at Kursk, close enough to the front for Hitler to intervene daily. The offensive failed. In October 1943, the whole project was abandoned, and the front went west without it. What got built before they walked away is the interesting part, because it's measurable. About 400 cubic meters of concrete had been poured. Barracks and blockhouses covering 3,599 square meters were standing. The protected bunker complex that was the entire point, the part meant to keep Hitler alive, had not been started. Hold that 400 cubic meters against the figure from the beginning of this video. The headquarters program as a whole consumed over 1 million cubic meters of concrete and something close to 12 million days of forced labor. Olga is what the very bottom of that ledger looks like, and it is still one of the 14. The same decision was being made everywhere that autumn. Wasserburg near Pskov was finished and handed to Army Group North. Zigeuner near Thionville was to be built inside captured Maginot Line tunnels and never was. Wolfsschlucht 3 at Saint-Rémy in the Loire Valley was abandoned around a railway tunnel that had already been fitted with armoured doors. Olga is 400 cubic meters of concrete in a Belarusian field, and it counts. Now on to number 3. Wolfsschlucht 2, Margival, France. North of Soissons, in a steep wooded valley in Picardy, there are bunkers under the trees, bunkers in the village gardens, and bunkers in the fields. Counting the supporting positions, the site covers something in the order of 80 square kilometers. 7 villages around it were turned into strongpoints. There were more than 20 anti-aircraft positions and a ring of machine gun bunkers with armoured turrets. At the centre of it, the Lyon to Paris railway runs through a hill in a tunnel 647 metres long, 30 metres below the surface. Armoured doors were fitted at both ends. Hitler's special train was meant to stand inside it. Work began in 1942, and it was originally intended to hold the staff who would command the invasion of Britain. That invasion never happened. Together with the tunnel complex in the Owl Mountains, this one site accounts for more than half of all the concrete the entire Führer headquarters program ever poured. Hitler used it once. On the 17th of June 1944, 11 days after the Normandy landings, he met Erwin Rommel and Gerd von Rundstedt in the main room of Bunker Number 1. Rommel argued for a realistic assessment of a front that was already lost and raised ending the war, which did not go well. An Allied air raid then forced everyone into the shelter. Afterwards, a V-1 flying bomb malfunctioned and came down a few miles away. He left for Germany the same day and never returned. Walter Model used the place briefly that August, and then the Americans took it. Remember that swimming pool in the pine forest? Margival has one too, sitting empty in the trees near a cinema and a hotel block, and it was used exactly as often as the tunnel was. Most of the bunkers can be visited today with a guide. Number 2. Baerenhoehle, Krasny, Russia. About a kilometre from Gniezdovo, on the road from Smolensk towards Katyn, there is a squat concrete cube standing in the forest with a footprint of 43 square metres. Nobody has ever established how far down it goes. Beside it you can still see the embankment of the private railway spur, and the platform at Gniezdovo was lengthened so Hitler's train could stop there. Building began on the 1st of October 1941. As a Führer headquarters, it was never used. It became the command centre of Army Group Centre instead, which is how it ended up hosting the closest anyone came to killing Hitler before 1944. On the 13th of March 1943, he flew in for a conference with Field Marshal Günther von Kluge. Officers on Kluge's own staff were waiting for him. Henning von Treschow, who had turned against the regime after learning what the killing squads were doing behind the lines, had a bomb built from British plastic explosive and wrapped as 2 bottles of Cointreau. His aide, Fabian von Schlabrendorf, triggered the acid fuse at the airfield and handed the parcel to Lieutenant Colonel Heinz Brandt as he boarded, on the story that it was payment for a lost bet. It was set for 30 minutes. It should have brought the aircraft down near Minsk. Hitler landed at Rastenburg 2 hours later. Schlabrendorf flew after it the next day, swapped it for 2 real bottles of brandy, and opened the live one. The acid had eaten through the wire. The striker had fallen. The detonator was a dud, most likely frozen in an unheated cargo hold. He survived the war and wrote it all down, which is the only reason any of this is known in that much detail. The cube is still there. Its twin, a kilometre away, is privately owned and has never been surveyed, because the ground around it was an NKVD site before the war and a reserve command post for a Soviet missile army afterwards. And Hitler had flown in that morning from the place at number 1. Number 1. Werwolf, Stryzhavka, Ukraine. 12 kilometers north of Vinnytsia, off the Kiev road, there is a pine forest with slabs of concrete lying in it the size of cars, tipped at angles, with reinforcing bars coming out of the broken edges. In among them is a rectangular basin, tiled, intact, and full of green rainwater. It is a swimming pool, and it is the most complete structure left on the site. Construction started on the 1st of November 1941, under the cover name Anlage Eichenhain, Camp Oak Grove. Organisation Todd used Soviet prisoners of war and local Ukrainian labour, and had it finished by June 1942. What they built was about 20 wooden cottages, up to 3 heavy bunkers, ground defences linked by tunnels, minefields, anti-tank ditches, and observation platforms in the oak trees. There was a tea house, a barber's shop, a bathhouse, a sauna, a cinema, and that pool, which was put in for Hitler and which he never used. He was afraid of being poisoned, so a German horticultural firm ran a vegetable garden on site. His own chef picked the produce, and it was chemically analysed before a taster ate it. Oxygen cylinders were kept on hand. Staff came in on a 3-hour flight from Berlin to the airfield at Konewka, 20 kilometers away, or on a train from Berlin-Charlottenburg that took 34 hours. When it was finished, the forced labourers who had built it were lined up and shot. 4,000 of them. Hitler moved in on the 16th of July, 1942, and stayed until the 30th of October. It was the hottest place he ever commanded from, up to 45 degrees, and the bunkers were damp. He caught influenza and ran a temperature of 40. In that state, from that forest, he issued the directive that split Army Group South in 2 so it could take Stalingrad and the Caucasus oil fields at the same time. That order is one of the reasons the 6th Army died at Stalingrad. He came back twice. In the spring of 1943 to watch Erich von Manstein's counterattack at Kharkov, and again that August as Kharkov was lost for good. On the 28th of December 1943, he ordered it destroyed. The retreating Germans mined the underground works and brought the bunkers down. When the Red Army took Vinnytsia on the 20th of March 1944, the site was searched on Stalin's orders and not a single document was found. The Soviets then sealed what was left of the underground permanently. Today it's a memorial complex to the victims, with a walking route, panels in Ukrainian and English, and a memorial at Stryzhavka over the grave pits. It sits in a country at war, 12 kilometers from a city that has been hit by missiles more than once since 2022, and it is still open. Concrete, this deliberately destroyed, usually stays destroyed. This one kept the pool. 14 of these places were finished. Hitler set foot in fewer than half. The rest were staffed, wired, guarded, and left standing. Empty for a man who was somewhere else. And the labour that built them came out of prisoner of war camps and occupied villages. What survives is not what anyone intended. The ones he used least are the ones you can walk into. The ones he used most were blown up by their own side. A Polish tunnel became a fish depot. A German bunker became a guest house, a Belgian village, got its church back. And in a Ukrainian pine forest, the only thing the dynamite missed was a swimming pool nobody ever swam in. There are more of them. Wasserberg, Zigeuner, Waldwiese, the tunnels at Saint-Rémy. Subscribe and we'll go and find them. Thank you.